Of course, it's hard to believe, especially for those who don't know leftists, Bolsheviks, communists, Marxists, progressives, in other words, socialists in any of their forms and guises. People, especially Americans, by the way, think that a politician is going to fulfill, well, as much as possible, most or at least half of their promises. Well, that's in republics, in democracies, where a politician thinks about tomorrow, assuming that he'll have to run for election again. The goal of a Marxist politician, it's even hard to call him a Marxist, is different. The goal of a Marxist is to come to power by any means, and then hold on to it, again by any means, disregarding all their promises and obligations. Well, just look at Putin, yes, look at the bandit Lukashenko, look at Maduro, at the Castro brothers, and at others like Pol Pot and Ceausescu. But the difference with developed socialism, I remember Khrushchev loved that phrase, developed socialism, means that everything there is seized, under control. Security forces are prepared to commit crimes. The gulags are built and already filling up. It's the same with the mission of capitalism, with socialism, which dominates in Europe, the United States of America, Canada, Japan, and Israel. Even in Australia, where everyone walks upside down and rides ostriches, that's just how I imagined Australia when I saw it on the globe. On the other side, on the other side of the earth, yes, that's right, they're definitely walking completely upside down. So the difference, or as they say in Odessa, by the way, two big differences, is that the socialists haven't yet built a system to hold on to their power for centuries, so they have to find ways to manage. Well, that means they still have to answer for their words. For example, in Magdin, he hasn't even entered the mayor's office yet, but he already has to answer for what he said.
You will never believe what happened. The ultra-radical elected mayor of New York has just made a stunning turnaround. This exposes the entire corruption of far-left politicians. This 34-year-old Democratic socialist promoted radical leftist ideas and incendiary rhetoric throughout his campaign, promising to stand up to Donald Trump. But now that he has actually won and reality is setting in, he is frantically backing away from his most controversial promises. And now he's even groveling before none other than Trump himself, and you just won't believe what Trump did next.
He can't build his communo-fascism, I can't even call it anything else, without the help of the state. Well, that's the leadership of the state. New York is one of the 50 states in our union, home to New York City, and governed by the federals, the leaders of the Union of North American States. He won't have enough money to ensure this, so to speak, communo-fascism, and he and his city council can't raise taxes. They can do it as much as they want, they just don't have the right to do so, and no one will pay. That means the Constitution of the state of New York, not the city, and federal law don't provide for that. So what should a poor, well, not very poor Mamdani do then? And he asked someone, Trump, please help me build communism in one separate city, please, so I can prove to America that it's possible and that capitalism is rotten and needs to be changed. And as for you, Trump, should you be put in jail or executed, whichever you prefer? Of course.
You may remember it was just a few short weeks ago during Zoran Mamdani's victory speech when he said these words.
So, Donald Trump, since I know for sure that you're watching right now, I have just 4 words for you.
Please turn up the volume. Seriously, is that all you're capable of? The whole world, including the president, is watching right now, so you say turn up the volume. I mean, man, is that really the best you can do? Turn it up. Louder. Well, let's just say that since that very night, we've been witnessing probably the most humiliating retreat of any modern political figure. Mamdani has been refusing for the past 3 weeks almost every promise he made during his election campaign. Well, as it turned out, the volume was officially turned down. Remember how Mamdani advocated for replacing police officers with social workers for certain crimes? Yes, that's gone. It's been canceled. Remember the free public transport he promised? Yeah, that's gone too. Goodbye. That's not going to happen. Remember those state-run grocery stores? They're gone too. And so on. The list could go on and on. I mean, Mamdani. Bitter experience shows that there's a fundamental difference between making promises and actually keeping them.
I don't actually completely agree with Steve. And Mamdani isn't a fool. He's a trickster, of course. A typical, so to speak, Levantine trickster. And he's never managed anything, meaning he's never been responsible for anything. But in theory, I'm absolutely sure he knows perfectly well that what he promised is impossible to do. Well, you just can't, so is he a fool? Then why did he make those promises? Well, come on, take a guess. He made those promises 3 times just to win, that's all. And he thinks that those who act differently are complete idiots. And his team is full of those. Well, there are careerists, I don't know how to put it more precisely. Career people, they're not just careerists, they're career people who worked in the government, and those who came to him to get back into power. For money, for convenience, for prestige. Well, under de Blasio, let's say, they were in the mayor's office, and they know everything perfectly well. De Blasio was almost like Mamdani, but still not Mamdani. And now Mamdani isn't clarifying things, as Steve says something new. Right now, he's looking for ways to stay in power, and he'll do absolutely anything for that.
The fundamental problem with Mamdani is that as a mayor, he can't raise taxes. He knows he needs to raise taxes significantly to pay for all the promised free things. But the New York State Constitution requires that all tax increases go through Albany, and Governor Hochul has already stated that she is strongly opposed to any further tax increases. For the residents of New York, some of the most taxed people on the planet, especially those who can pack up and leave the state, as they have done by the hundreds of thousands since 2020. And then Trump, of course, is threatening to cut off funding to New York permanently. He has already frozen $18 billion in New York infrastructure projects such as the Gateway Rail Tunnel, the project under the Hudson River, and the 2nd Avenue subway expansion. So Mamdani, once again, he's caught between a rock and a hard place, and what's even worse, New York itself is just falling apart. We reported on this just a couple of days ago. Staten Island wants to secede from New York. We've already talked about this. A number of Republican-dominated districts in cities across the country are successfully breaking away from their larger Democrat-run municipalities. We just saw this happen in Louisiana, in St. George. It's a district with a population of about 100,000 people. They successfully broke away from Baton Rouge and are now an independent municipality. The city of Memphis has been steadily shrinking over the past few years because at least 3 districts have successfully left its city limits. And now Staten Island, which is predominantly Republican, wants to do the same thing in New York City. Mamdani was the last straw for them. And here's what I think happened behind the scenes with all these developments. What happened behind the scenes? Governor Hochul basically gave Mamdani a serious dressing down and told him that he not only had to publicly renounce all these free things, all these handouts he had promised, but what's even worse, man, you want money from Albany, you want money from us.
Then go and unfreeze the billions of frozen dollars from Washington again.
I'm sure Mamdani and his people knew perfectly well that they'd have to walk back their promise, that they'd have to bow to Trump. But since victory depended on how their hero Zacron fought the evil dragon Trump, Zacron went all out. But in his victory speech on Election Day, he went overboard and got carried away by his emotions. Naturally, this was probably his biggest mistake of the entire campaign, his victory speech. It revealed the inner self he had previously kept hidden. Only until he walks back his communist promises and Trump won't give him a penny. Well, let's be precise. Trump won't give him even a cent.
So it's now official. Mamdani is heading straight to the White House. He's going there to grovel humbly before the king's throne. And what Trump did next will definitely lift your spirits.
Well, before that, if you want to get quality content, you not only need to subscribe, but also hit the bell. Otherwise, some videos won't reach you, notifications won't come, and we post videos when the news comes in. Most of the time, it's twice a day. In the morning, it's about us, what happened yesterday and overnight. And in the evening, it's about what happened during the day. And of course, for those who decide to become sponsors, ladies and gentlemen, it's $4 a month. For them, we make separate video series on current topics. So by doing this, you really help us, and we are grateful to you. So Danny's mom really wants to be accepted at the White House and have a heart-to-heart talk with Trump, like with a friend, like a New Yorker, like a fellow citizen of the great country of America.
President Trump on Truth Social announced that Mamdani was put in his place, or rather on his knees, according to the communist mayor of New York, Zoran Kavami. Mamdani requested a meeting, and we agreed that this meeting will take place in the Oval Office on Friday, November 21.
Trump, in a short tweet, or rather it's not a tweet anymore on Truth Social, I think it's called a truth, not a tweet. Yes, he summed up all his attitude toward Mamdani, the communist Zoran Kwame. Mamdani, as he usually does, Barack Hussein Obama. Zoran Kwame mom requested not me, we agreed. And then, in a month, unless I change my mind, we'll meet. And here is the reaction of the press.
Meeting with Trump and Mamdani. I'm glad Mayor Mamdani is leaving since he never had a job. Now Trump can explain how the world works to him. First of all, you are not going to arrest Prime Minister Netanyahu when he comes to New York, so you can forget about that. And he did work, right? Secondly, you have to cooperate with federal law enforcement and immigration services when we come to the city to ensure compliance with federal immigration laws. Forget that. I hope the president explains how the world works to him. Federal laws and international diplomacy are handled by the president, not the New York mayor.
So Scott sees this as something like, let's say, a fatherly visit. Little Zoran will skip into the Oval Office and then he'll be seated. And they'll explain in detail how the world really works and that the policy he's defending literally has nothing to do with reality. If you don't know moms, yeah, he doesn't run around. What was Scott Jennings talking about? He keeps saying everywhere that New York is, quote, a city of international law. The law of the country, so to speak, according to Mamdani, is replaced by the law of the world, and that's why Trump constantly calls Mamdani a communist. He is absolutely taken with this universal, utopian, one-size-fits-all Marxist theory that goes beyond the constitutional republic.
Again, I think Mamdani is not an idiot, but a scoundrel. Definitely not an idiot, but a scoundrel. He believes in communism. He believes in internationalism. It's like thinking an apple could fall from a tree and fly sideways instead of down. And why do you believe that so much? I just believe it, that's all, just like in that series of jokes about Armenian radio. What was that series called? Yes, what? I have a samovar with one handle under my bed. My samovar, I can put it wherever I want. By the way, I don't even mention that it has only one handle, because I broke off the second handle. That's why it's a samovar with one handle and it's under the bed. And it's full of liquid.
Well, to hell with the United States Constitution, to hell with the New York State Constitution. As the mayor of New York, I will abide by international law, made by a few people thousands of miles away whose names we can't pronounce through globalist groups like the United Nations. And here again are these clearly absurd promises from Mamdani threatening to arrest Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu if he visits the city. Or for that matter, Russian President Vladimir Putin. I mean, he's literally saying this nonsense. And again, aside from how absurd this is, how the hell, Mr. Mamdani, tell me, for God's sake, do you propose to make the New York Police Department arrest the president of the Russian Federation? Does that even begin to enter your little skull? What is this? That act would be an automatic and irreversible act of war with a nuclear power. On top of that, if it were Putin, or to put it simply, do you think Putin's security detail, would his military even allow a single New York police officer to get closer than 6 meters to Putin if he came to New York? It's the same with Netanyahu. I'm serious, we're not in 7th grade. This isn't middle school.
He's counting exactly on those pimply little punks from middle school, the ones who voted for him, dropouts with sexual problems. A few brothels with moderate prices. It would solve a lot of problems for this frustrated youth with university degrees, and the pimples would disappear.
And again, to make it even more absurd, Mamdani says that the arrest of Putin or Netanyahu is related to the execution of International Criminal Court warrants. It's about the good faith execution of warrants issued by the International Criminal Court, the International Criminal Court. Mamdani adds that making it more absurd is the idea of arresting Putin, Netanyahu, or anyone else. This is about the execution of International Criminal Court warrants, and it's about the good faith execution of warrants issued by the International Criminal Court, the International Criminal Court. And again, he seems completely unaware of the fact that the United States is not even a party to the International Criminal Court, and its orders have no force here. As a sovereign nation, we are not subject to the International Criminal Court. We, as a nation, do not recognize their authority because they are nothing more than a ridiculous, liberal, crazy activist disguised as an international lawyer, as if such a thing even exists. Florida Congressman Barron Donalds, the future governor of Florida, had to remind Mamdani that he has no authority to impose international law. Donalds just destroyed him, saying that, well, again, this idea is literally insanely poor. It doesn't even have the slightest manifestation in reality. President Trump shows exactly how to act in such situations. He doesn't refuse to meet with Mamdani. That would have given the media a reason to claim that Trump is sowing discord or something like that. Instead, he brings him into the Oval Office to lay down the law like a benevolent father. Trump will remind this communist mayor that funding comes with conditions, and one of them is compliance with federal law. That's leadership. That's how you negotiate from a position of strength.
And now analysis from economist, historian, and analyst Victor David Hansen.
The mayor's loud promise of free buses in New York fell through as soon as the real numbers came to light. But this isn't a shocking surprise, since we've seen this same scenario play out dozens of times in different cities and with different leaders. Every time some politician stands up and claims that something huge is suddenly going to become completely free, people naturally get excited and thrilled at first. Their hearts beat faster with possibilities and hope for an easy life, but then unwelcome reality shows up. The true costs are revealed, and the whole fantasy collapses like a house of cards in a hallelujah hurricane. So Trump noticed the fatal flaws of this scheme long before everyone else. And that's because he genuinely understands how money works, how budgets function, and how huge urban systems really operate in the real world, not in political fantasies. That's exactly why New York exploded with reactions so incredibly quickly. After his direct comment, his words tore off the veil and revealed the shaky, unstable foundation of this ridiculous idea. The first huge problem with the mayor's bus plan is actually surprisingly simple if you look into it. The entire New York bus system is already running at a loss, and it doesn't have enough funds to operate smoothly.
In the red, well, that means they're in the negative, in the red. Yes, it means they can't make ends meet. They're losing $300 million every year.
The fleet consists of old, worn-out buses that are constantly breaking down, routes that haven't been updated in decades, and endless lines for repairs. The system desperately needs billions and billions just to maintain basic normal operations and prevent a complete collapse. So when someone suddenly jumps up and cheerfully declares that all fares should disappear, the financial bleeding becomes absolutely catastrophic and unsustainable. Transport experts have calculated the real numbers and now say that this brilliant plan will cost between $700 and $800 million every year. Just to stay afloat, that's not pocket change or loose bills you find in your couch cushions. It's not something the mayor can magically conjure out of nowhere just because the proposal sounds so appealing and pleasant and makes people feel good.
Mamdani never intended to fulfill any of what he promised or proposed. He was just lying. Well, sometimes he wasn't lying, but deceiving. And sometimes he wasn't lying or deceiving, but just telling falsehoods.
Trump laid out the harsh, naked truth without sugarcoating anything. He bluntly stated that the city cannot survive and thrive on beautiful dreams and wishful thinking alone. He explained that the math simply doesn't allow for such radical changes without destructive consequences, and Trump hit the nail on the head with perfect accuracy. History clearly shows that cities losing huge streams of revenue without a reliable backup plan are inevitably forced to make cuts everywhere else, including to vital services. They ruthlessly cut safety programs, they stop necessary repairs, they lay off staff en masse, everything slows down more and more, everything becomes weaker and more fragile until the whole system is on the brink. We went through this nightmare in 1972 when New York was on the verge of bankruptcy because the leadership completely ignored expenses and lived in denial. The quick response of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority leadership proved their point. Head Jana Lieber stated directly that the mayor's idea did not contain any clear, detailed plan. He said that the proposal was extremely underdeveloped and completely raw. This is a diplomatic, polite way of saying that the plan was absolutely not ready to be put into action, with real money and real consequences. And that's exactly why ordinary residents of New York began to feel deep anxiety and suspicion. They saw how Lieber made absolutely grand promises without bothering to show real numbers or explain where the money would come from. That's why everyone started saying that the idea didn't stand up to scrutiny. It didn't fail because of party politics or personal attacks. It just failed. Because mathematical reality always defeats fantasy every single time without exception.
Let's remember Margaret Thatcher. Let's remember Ronald Reagan. All those who warned us before everything built by the free market was stolen and squandered. Capitalism. They will succeed at everything. It will be very, very good. They are fascists, communists, socialists, Maoists, Trotskyists, and other collectivists. By the way, there's a link to my book, Capitalism 101, in the description. Download it for free. And I explain all this in simple language, so to speak. It's available in Russian and in English, and I think I tell it in an entertaining way.
The key point in this complicated story is the sharp reaction of Governor Kathy Hochul. She publicly spoke out about the bus system. Funds are still needed for normal operation. This single destructive phrase completely destroyed the essence of the mayor's bold proposal. When the governor, transportation experts, and the president all say the same thing together, the idea instantly loses all credibility. This perfectly demonstrates how weak ideas fall apart. Under real pressure, they crumble to dust when someone with real experience responds firmly with facts instead of emotions and feelings. Trump understands New York on a much deeper and more personal level than any mayor ever could. He has been building huge buildings all over the city for decades. He personally handled complex unions, dealt with endless permits, managed construction delays, fought tough budgets, and survived brutal inspections. He knows exactly how the city responds and reacts when money suddenly runs out and disappears. That's why his message carried such enormous weight and authority. He clearly warned that the city desperately needs stability and predictability, not wild fantasies and reckless experiments. He said that irresponsible ideas hit the working class first and hardest. And he is absolutely right about this harsh reality. When transportation systems lose money and go bankrupt, it's always the poor neighborhoods that suffer. Painfully slow buses, ruined stations, and ridiculously long waits in terrible conditions. Ironically, free rides hurt and ruin exactly those whom they are supposedly meant to help and protect.
A precise account of the situation.
The most fascinating part of this whole saga is how the mayor started rapidly changing his words and taking them back even before this pressure began. He boldly claimed that the plan was a full-fledged, comprehensive program ready to launch. After a barrage of criticism, he suddenly stated that it was just a pilot project, a small test in the form of a near future that might possibly come true someday. This abrupt shift shows that the idea lacked substance from the very beginning. Strong ideas with a solid foundation don't magically change shape when challenged. Only weak ideas desperately change and transform. This shows that language is always changing and shifting. When leaders panic and try to cover up obvious flaws and problems, and voters can absolutely see right through this transparent trick, they instantly sense when something is dishonest and manipulative. New Yorkers reacted with anger because they were deliberately misled and deceived. They want better, cleaner, reliable buses, but even more, they want honesty. They need a genuine funding plan with real numbers, not an empty campaign slogan created just to win elections. That's why this became a huge controversy so quickly, overnight. New Yorkers know the city is expensive to maintain. They understand deeply that nothing in life is truly free if someone somewhere isn't paying for it. And so when they finally saw the huge hidden cost lurking beneath the surface, they immediately felt that the plan was unserious or illegitimate. Trump's powerful response created even more pressure because he focused on dependencies on federal funding. New York depends on Washington for many crucial things. Security support, emergency funds, housing assistance programs, and vital transportation funds all come from federal sources. If the mayor is reckless, pushing a giant idea without a clear plan or source of funding, the federal government will naturally question everything and might even withdraw its support. Trump simply voiced what many federal officials were already thinking privately, and once he said it publicly for everyone to hear. Every weak, vulnerable part of the plan was suddenly in the spotlight. This serves as evidence of a deeper systemic problem affecting governance. Many Democratic leaders usually start with pure emotions and feelings. They believe good intentions alone ensure success, but cities require strict logic and discipline, not just hopes and dreams. They need detailed budgets, realistic deadlines, and reliable backup plans in case something goes wrong. When Democrats ignore the basics and skip the hard work, their bold ideas inevitably collapse. That's why many major American cities today are struggling with crime, homelessness, and decline. They're guided by feelings, not structure and accountability. The bus idea failed spectacularly because it tried to bypass the hardest part entirely. It tried to ignore and skip the math altogether. History shows that skipping the hard part always leads to failure. Trump instinctively grasps this truth. He speaks simply and directly, and his instincts about costs and risks are often surprisingly accurate. He instantly recognizes a bad plan. New York is already facing huge expenses, rapidly growing needs, and extremely limited budgets that leave no room for maneuver. Another huge bill without a source of funding? This is not leadership at all. It's reckless and dangerous behavior, and New Yorkers immediately felt this truth. That's why this topic exploded on social media. That's why the whole city responded so loudly and decisively. People realized that the plan didn't match reality at all. One sharp statement from Trump did what the entire city government couldn't do. It brought the uncomfortable truth out into the open where everyone could see it. It made people really look at the numbers, not just their feelings, and it forced the mayor to defend something he couldn't explain with facts. And in the harsh world of politics, that's exactly how weak ideas die a painful death. That's why the city exploded with arguments, that's why the plan fell apart, and that's why Trump's voice had such a devastating impact.
Well, I still think that Mamdani is not an idiot. He's a liar. The son of a bitch is not a fool, so who is the fool? Someone must be a fool, right? You ask, who's the fool? Is the fool or are the fools the ones who voted for him? And this immediately shows the idiocy of political democracy in which we, ladies and gentlemen, exist. Democracy, which we love so much, thought we always loved, always leads to tyranny. First, the tyranny of the majority. Well, over there. The Bolsheviks say there are more of us, so we will dictate to everyone else. Yes, 51%, so you will do as we say. Then, when they take everything they can from the working, thinking, enterprising minority, who are always a minority, such people in the spoiled plebs, in Russian that's called bydlo, the mooing crowd demands to keep being supported. A group of liars who rose to the top through deception impose a curfew, food ration cards, and barbed wire between themselves and the bydlo. And then the next phase begins, a dictatorship or the tyranny of the minority. Very soon, as has happened countless times in France, Russia, or elsewhere within that minority, the spiders start devouring each other, and the last one standing is declared the father of the nation, sometimes the generalissimo, the first among equals. His portraits hang in every school and in every square. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen,